Hey guys, today we're going to break down a McKinsey slide. And what we're looking for here is to understand, what are they doing well? What could they have done differently? And take some learnings and lessons from what they've done and apply it in our own slide building. So this is the slide we're going to break down. And this is a slide from a real life McKinsey deck. So you may have heard me say this before, but the key thing about building slides is one slide, one message, encapsulated in the lead-in and supported by the body. So let's start there. So this is the lead-in at the top, and you can see the lead-in basically says after 20 years of rapid growth, traditional flows have declined relative to GDP. That is one message, but it actually has kind of two sub-messages in it. The first one is this one, which is after 20 years of rapid growth, and the second one is here, which is traditional flows have declined relative to GDP. So if we're going to say this in that lead-in, we need to show both of those things in the body of the slide. McKinsey have decided to use one chart to show both of those things, and it's the big chart at the bottom. So this bit here is talking about the decline relative to GDP, and this bit here is showing the 20 years of rapid growth. So they've used a combo chart to do that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. If I were to build the slide, I'd probably do it slightly differently and have potentially two charts. I'll come back to that in a second. The other thing they've done is they've added an additional chart here. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this chart is supposed to tell us because nothing to do with this chart is referenced in the lead-in. So basically what we have to do as the reader is we have to figure out what's the so what or implication of this chart. And in fact, it breaks the cardinal rule of slide making because it doesn't support any part of the lead-in. It's not actually necessary. So generally speaking, I would say this is not something you need in the slide. If there is an important point to make and this chart makes it, it either needs to be in the lead-in or it deserves its own slide. So that's the general gist of the slide. I'll make a couple of other comments on some other things. They've done well to label the chart, including like the time period and the metrics. They haven't included any axes in these charts, which is one of the things that you really need to do. And the other thing is they've included a legend, which is important as well. Just one more comment, I suppose, on some of the choices they've made for the chart. They've spaced the labels out by 10 years, but they've included some key dates, which are the GFC and the last data point, which I think is a good choice as well. So based on what we've just talked about, the fact that we could potentially do this with two charts, that there's a redundant chart on the slide, and there's potentially some missing things like axes, the question then is, how would we build the chart differently? I'm going to jump into PowerPoint and rebuild this chart with a different approach. All right, let's go. All right, as I said, I'm going to have two charts in here. So one to show the 20 years of growth and one to show the reduction relative to GDP. So that means I'm going to use something called a two-panel slide. What I'll do first is I'll just set up these two panels. All right, this is how I'm going to set it up. There's going to be a chart on the left which shows 20 years of growth and a chart on the right which shows the reduction relative to GDP. Now I separately pulled all the data points out, so I'm just going to quickly drop the charts in and show you what it looks like. Cool, and these are the two charts. On the left-hand side, I've chosen an area chart, and the reason for that is because area charts are good to show the growth of something when it's stacked, when it can be broken down into components. In this case, we have goods, services, and finance. I've also strategically chosen labels every 3 data points, every 3 years. And that's because we want to keep the chart reasonably neat and tidy, but it is important to see what those values are. And finally, I've included a CAGR arrow, which has the growth rate from 1980 to 2017, and that growth rate is 5.8% per year. So that's what I've done for the 20 years of growth chart. On the right-hand side, I have the reduction relative to GDP. In this case, I've chosen a line chart, and the reason for that is because it's a proportion over time, and line charts are good to show proportions over time. I think the really important thing for the line chart is we've included a difference arrow here. That's important because we are showing the reduction in the last few years from 51% to 35%. And I guess the other key thing to talk about in regards to this difference arrow is that I don't use a percentage, I use the absolute difference. So I'm saying here that the difference between 51 and 35, I'm not giving you the percentage difference, I'm giving you the percentage point difference. And there's a nuance there. Okay, so they're the two charts. Now what we need to do is write in the headers for each of the panels. All right, so finish the headings. The first one is to say total flows of goods, services, and finance grew by 5.8% between 1980 and 2017. So that eloquently describes what this chart is showing. And then the second one, but in the last 10 years, total flows as a percentage of GDP has declined significantly. Again, that describes exactly what's in this chart. And I think the key here is to think about the logic of the slide. So you have your lead in at the top, and the lead in is the overall summary of the point you're trying to make in the slide. So here we're saying, yeah, after 20 years of rapid growth, traditional flows have declined relative to GDP. Then that high level breaks down into two subpoints. The first subpoint is, total flows has grown rapidly over the last 20 years. And the second subpoint is, but in the last 10 years, total flow as a percentage of GDP has declined significantly. So you can see it kind of cascades down. And this is what people talk about when they talk about the pyramid principle. And if you want to learn more about, the pyramid principle, the McKinsey principle, and other important slide making and strategy concepts, I've got a link in the description to a free email course, and I go through a bunch of those things, completely free to sign up. Just drop in your email. That's it. That's the breakdown of the McKinsey slide. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment box down below. Hope that was useful.